Welcome to our final session of the Reggae University at this year's Rototom Sunsplash. It's hard to believe that we've already reached the last day, but here we are. People in the back of the hall, if you'd like to come forward, you're certainly welcome to do so. We've got a double session today, both celebrating the life and work of Robert Nesta Marley, Bob Marley and the Wailers, Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and to a certain extent, Bunny Wailer. Just to introduce the other members of the panel, on the extreme right to your extreme left, we have the Italian journalist, radio presenter, and DJ Pier Tosi. And next to him, Ellen Koehlings, one of the editors of Riddim Magazine in Germany, which is Europe's largest and best reggae publication. On the extreme left, we have Pete Lilly, who's also an editor from Riddim Magazine in Germany. And for those of you who don't already know, I'm David Katz, author of People Funny Boy, The Genius of Lee Scratch Perry, and Solid Foundation, An Oral History of Reggae. And in the first part of our session, we have two very special guests. From the band Tosh Meets Marley, we have first, to my immediate left, bassist George Fullwood. And next to him, we have guitarist and vocalist Junior Marvin. And in the second part of our session, we also have the esteemed journalist John Masouri, author of WAILIN'BLUES, the story of Bob Marley's Wailers. John. So I'd like to begin just by asking Fully and Junior to tell us a little bit about the concept behind Tosh Meets Marley, because you're here today in the form of Tosh Meets Marley. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about it.
Well, to make it more simple, is that over the past years of these two great legends, they have brought us a tremendous amount of great music and inspiration to all of us as human and who love this music, reggae. I have the great privilege of working with both the original Wailers from way back and toured with Pete until his death. So for me, it's something I feel personal that I wanted to do, to go out there and try to spread their message and their word and their love for this music to the younger generation who have not really get a chance to see these two great legends in person. So, and again, working with Peter, it's tragic that I feel he didn't get a chance and opportunity to show the world and to spread his music. So that's a misfortune, and I just feel, you know, the privilege of taking that to different part of the world and bringing it to the younger race of people who love the music and never get a chance of seeing them. So that's the journey and the mission that both Junior and I have taken on, and I hope, you know, that everybody will understand and join in with us to help celebrate these two legends.
Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Junior Marvin. I met Bob Marley on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, 1977. And for me, it was a dream come true. I heard the song Concrete Jungle, and I said, I wish I was playing in that band. And one day, Chris Blackwell said, come, I want you to meet someone. And he took me to meet Bob Marley. And Bob Marley shook my hand and said, welcome to the Wailers. And I was on cloud 9, flying. I was so happy to be invited to play with the Wailers. and I had a great time working with Bob. He was a very hard worker. He loved to play soccer. He loved the women, and he loved music. And of course, he loved Jah, Rastafari. And I continued to play with the Wailers up until 1997. And I took my first break. I worked in the United States at XM Satellite Radio on the reggae channel that's 24/7. And it's the first satellite radio ever. And I was very honored to do Marley Lives, a special tribute show every night for Bob Marley. Following that, I rejoined the Wailers, took another break, and I met Fullwood in South America. And when I saw them playing, I started to cry because they sounded better than when they played with Peter. Not only good, but better. And before Bob Marley passed, he said to me, if you play the music, play the same level or better. And I wanted to play better. So I joined forces with Fullwood, and I think we are the best reggae band in the world right now. Tosh meets Marley. And I'm very honored to work with them.
Yes. Okay, so you've given us a little bit of a description of how the two of you came to be working together and a little bit of the concepts and ideas behind the group Tosh Meets Marley. But I know that both of you also have very rich histories of involvement in reggae music and other types of music before this period. So I wondered if each of you could just let the audience know a little bit more about your own personal journeys within music. So Fully, for example, perhaps you can start by telling us about the very important work that you did with the Soul Syndicate band, which is where you first came into contact with Marley, Tosh, and the Wailers.
Yeah, well, this journey began in the 60s. And when I first started my group, Soul Syndicate Band. And that journey took me with great players like Chinna Smith, Santa Davis, and Tony Chin. And throughout those times, up in the 70s, going into the 70s, we were also known as the #1 recording band in Jamaica, because we would record with every single major artist you can talk about that even work here from Jamaica. And that's where I also met the Wailers, the original Wailers, first with Lee Scratch Perry as the Upsetters. And we went in the studio. One of my first recording with the Wailers was Sun is Shining and Mr. Brown and many more that some of them did not release because of the politics with Chris and Lee Scratch. But also, again, with Soul Syndicate, it was a legend group because that group had played and recorded with everybody. For instance, the very first song that Michael Rose has ever sung, we record. Michael Rose wanted to be a vocalist for us. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was recorded by Soul Syndicate, 90 Observer. Also, there are so many other group people like Gregory Isaac, his first set of recording, Love Overdue, and all those great songs was recorded by Soul Syndicate. Dennis Brown, all of Dennis Brown, most of his great big hits. Ken Boothe, Delroy Wilson. I can just keep naming all those great artists. So for me, my musical career was very rich, and I'm very proud to be a part of that history, sharing it with all those great legends. So here I am, still doing that work, and I will forever be grateful to this music and to the people that support me. So thanks again.
Well, I left Jamaica when I was 9 years old. My family went to England, and I went with my family to England. I went to school in England, and I first met a band called Traffic with Steve Winwood, Chris Wood, Jim Capaldi, and they were very famous. And I was very young, and I worked with a singer called Linda Lewis, who's quite famous in Europe right now. I also worked with many African artists like Eddie Kwanso, Rebop, Remy Kabaka, and of course Fela Kuti. I was very honored to be allowed to play with these great musicians. I also worked with Ike and Tina Turner. I worked with Billy Preston. I worked with T-Bone Walker, who did Stormy Monday Blues, and many others that I can't remember right now, but I've done quite a few albums with many different artists, whether it's jazz or rock or blues or gospel, and of course reggae. I also recorded 2 rock albums when I was very young with a band called Hanson. The first one was called Now Hear This. The second one was called Magic Dragon. I also was very fortunate to meet a great singer from Jamaica by the name of Bob Marley. And he allowed me to play with the Wailers from 1977 on Exodus. Exodus was voted CD of the 20th century, #1 by Time magazine, and I'm very proud to have played on that album. And of course, Kaya, Survival, Babylon by Bus, Uprising, and all the albums with Bob Marley and the Wailers from 1977. And now I'm getting ready to go in the studio with Fullwood, George Kwaku, and many others from the band, and make the first Tosh Meets Marley album. So look out for it at the end of this year, okay? All right.
Right, now we're here exploring the legacy of Bob Marley and the Wailers. And Bob Marley as a figure, more than just an artist, as a kind of icon of music from the developing world and of humanity as a whole, is someone that has quite a lot of mystique attached to him. And especially for those of us who never had the pleasure to actually interact with him and know him only from his music, or for those who only heard his music after his death, for example. But yet both of you interacted with him personally, and I wondered if you both could just recount the first time you actually met Bob Marley and what the meeting was like. What was the man like as a person?
Well, when I met Bob, back in the days, Bob and Bunny and Peter, they were doing more like rocksteady ska. That's when I met Bob. In the studio and on live shows. We were doing a lot of shows around Kingston, Jamaica. And actually, to be honest with you, Bob is a special person. The reason why I say that, and I'm not just saying it, because Bob never passed me on the street, never. Anywhere that Bob would see, he would stop just to say hi and just to say hello. And it means a lot, you know, because that just to show you the type of person that particular person can be. So meeting Bob and talk to Bob, matter of fact, where I used to live, Bob used to come pass by and sit down at my gates with me and talk. We call it back by my yard, you know, way back in Walton Park Road. So, you know, it's something that will forever be with me, you know, especially working with him in the studio and on live show, because I was working with Bob before he was even dreadlocks. That's where I'm coming from, all 3 of them. You know what I mean? So for me, the journey of meeting Bob is very special, and I will forever cherish that, because it's see what's happening throughout the world, that he has created such an impact. And I can be able to tell my kids and my grandkids, that's this man I used to work with, know this man personally and talk to this man personally, and actually work on one of his million seller. So I feel proud of that, and it's an honor for me.
Well, like I said before, I met Bob Marley in London, and I went to where he was staying in a very fashionable part of London called Chelsea, where they have all the nice clothes and all the mud people with the nice cars. And I walked into the room, and I saw him from the back. Of course, he had a big locks. And I didn't know it was Bob. And the hair on my hand started to stand up, you know, when you get goosebumps. And he turned around, and he had a big smile, and a big spliff. Said, "What, Rasta? Long time I wait for you. Come on, let's play." And we played Jamming, Waiting in Vain, and Exodus. And when we finished playing, he slapped 5 like this. "Welcome to the Wailers." And I was so happy.
Similarly, Peter Tosh is someone that has a certain kind of mystique attached to him, although sometimes the public perception of Tosh is maybe that he was more volatile because he was someone who didn't mince his words and who maybe expressed himself in a particular fashion that was not necessarily easy to understand depending on one's command of patois or symbolic language. But I just wondered again if each of you, and particularly Fully, since you played with Tosh consistently over many years, if you could explain a little bit about the first meeting you had with him. What was he actually like as a person and your interactions with him musically?
Well, yeah. Well, during the days of the Wailers, the original Wailers, when I first met Peter, Peter was a very quiet person. Don't talk a lot. Very observed, you know what I mean, but smoke a lot. And people think that Peter, the way how him look, very serious. People think that Peter was so aggressive that you couldn't really approach him. That's how Peter demeanor was. But when I get the opportunity to start work with Peter and start tours with him, I get the opportunity to sit down with Peter, traveling for hundreds of miles on the buses and talk to Peter. And I can tell you something seriously from my heart. Peter was one of the most humblest men that you would ever met. For instance, we were someplace, I think it was in Atlanta, and a journalist wanted to talk to Peter. And she says, I met her, and she says, you know, I would like to say something to Peter. I would like to talk to him. But people tell me that he's very aggressive and, you know, I'm afraid. And I said, what? What are you talking about? So I said, hold on a minute. So I went inside just before the show. And Peter, of course, was sitting in a corner building his spliff because he always have a spliff. So I said, Bush, well, this lady want to talk to him. Say, yeah, man, come on, man. Tell her to come on. But the way how him say these things, it sounds very aggressive. So she was like really scared. So I leave her inside, and you know, probably about an hour or so, she came out and she was smiling and said, man, you know, I am so happy that you know, I speak to him. I said, well, did he bite off your ears? She says, no, it was nice, man. It sounds, you know, I was surprised. I said, well, there you go. So you cannot just listen to what people say. You have to talk to the man before you can really get to know who he is. So this is what I have to say about Peter, because, you know, there's so many different things that people can say about somebody when you don't meet that person and talk to that person. So from my experience and what I can tell you, he was like a gentle soul. Believe me, he was a very generous person. And I'm telling you, man, was one of the best band leader I have ever had in a long time. Believe me, I will never find another person that kind and that gentle and respected, very much respected. Because if I go inside a place and I say, man, him come to me and say, well, I'm full, you don't like that? I say, no. I say, well, immediately, he want to make me feel good and make all his players feel good. So that's just to show me where this man artist, you know. And again, we're all human beings, and some of us have different problems, but this is what I find in this particular man, that he was a gentle soul.
Well, I had two opportunities to meet Peter Tosh. The first was at One Love Peace concert in Jamaica. And there was 100,000 people in the stadium. And that was one of the best concerts I ever saw in my life. If you get a chance, if you can watch Heartland Reggae, you see Peter Tosh in Jamaica at the One Love Peace concert. He was fantastic. And the second opportunity was in Los Angeles, California, United States. We had a show, and Mick Jagger was there, Diana Ross was there. A lot of Hollywood stars came to the show. And it was a Bob Marley and the Wailers show. And Peter came, he came on stage, and he was singing with Bob, Get Up, Stand Up. And this was Peter. Get up, stand up. And this was Bob. Stand up for your rights. And Peter was so tall and Bob was like this. But it was the best get up, stand up ever. They were together, they were like magic. Peter and Bob. I love them both.
Due to shortness of time, we're going to open it up for question and answer with the audience for a moment. But before we do, Junior, because you just mentioned Tosh, this performance at the One Love Peace concert, which you can see in Heartland Reggae. In the footage of Heartland Reggae, you can see Tosh there with a fantastic band featuring Sly Dunbar. But one of the things that is really clear in that footage is Tosh's extreme abilities as a musician. You know, we know him chiefly as a vocalist and as a very exceptional songwriter, but he also had a lot of talent as a guitarist and as an organist. Yeah. And I just wondered if either of you, again, if you had any observations, I mean, fully if you saw him in the studio in the 60s.
Peter Tosh was Jamaica's first lead guitar player in reggae. The first one with a wow-wow. Yeah, the wow-wow. I mean, he created that sound. If you ever get a chance to listen to Steer It Up on the Old Grey Whistle Test, and you think it's a keyboard playing the solo, it's actually Peter playing the guitar with a wow-wow, and it sounds just like a keyboard, but it's fantastic. He was the first lead guitar player in reggae, and you have to respect him for that. He's a very good guitar player.
Also, on that particular song, Sun is Shining, that harmonica was Peter. Also, Naya Bingi drums. He was one of the best as far as Naya Bingi drumming goes. Very serious. So he was a very, very, very good musician also.
Yes. Do we have questions from the audience for our special guests, Fully Fullwood and Junior Marvin from the Tosh Meets Marley Band? Any questions for Fully or Junior? Well, while you're thinking of what questions to ask, and no need to be shy, Pierre has a question.
I have one question each. The first one to Fully is, we know at in the second half of the 70s, Peter Tosh was working with another band, What Sound and Power, that was basically Sly and Robbie, Robbie Lynn, Mikey Chung, Donald Kinsey, and yeah, and then he did switch to Soul Syndicate. And how it happened that you became his backing bands, starting such a long and fruitful relationship?
Well, after Sly and Robbie, that was back in the early 90s. It was 90, no, it was 80, I think it was 81, 82, when Sly decided to go and work with Chris, produce. And that's when Santa and myself was called, you know, with Peter, and that's when we joined the group.
So the basic reason is because Sly left?
Well, yes, Sly and Robbie, well, yeah. And then the group was changed, you know. Donald Kingsley, of course, was there. Steve Golin. And then the Tamblins were backup vocals, right, with Vision also. You know, yeah. And so
You mean Vision Walker from the
Vision Walker
original
from
Wailers? or-
right.
Yeah,
Was great,
okay.
yeah. And then Keith Stewart, Keith Sterling and Robbie Lynn. And then Robbie Lynn leave afterwards, so yeah.
Thank you. The one for Junior, you did mention Fela Kuti, so you did work with two you did mention Fela. You did work with Fela
he
Kuti.
came to London and did a lot of recordings, and I was working with his drummer,
Yeah,
Remy Kabaka.
yeah. But my question is, did you find something in common with those two personalities,
yeah.
Fela Kuti and Bob Marley?
Of course. Bob Marley's biggest fan was James Brown. He loved James Brown. And so also, Fela was the James Brown of Africa. You know? And they had a very similar aura. People around them gravitate to them. Sometimes with Bob, you're standing in the room with maybe 100, 200 people. And Bob come in the room, and you feel something in the back of your neck, and you turn around, and it's Bob, you know? He had a certain kind of vibe, and Fela had the same kind of vibe. He walk in the room, and you feel something. You look, and it's Fela, you know? So they're very special.
And in terms of personality, as dealing with
Oh,
people.
yeah, they were workaholics. Like Bob, he would play all day, and you say, Bob, I want to go to sleep. He said, okay, just 1 more hour. Just 1 more. And then you sleep only 2 hours for the whole day, you know. And Fela was also very he loved to work, loved to play. So they had that in common. They were both workaholics.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Are you all shy? You don't want to ask me nothing? Come on, ask me something.
Yeah, do we have some last questions for Fully Fullwood and Junior Marvin? Any questions from the audience? This is your opportunity.
Well, I have a question for all of you. Do you love reggae music? All right. Well, reggae music is to bring all people together, no matter what color, no matter what creed, no matter what religion, no matter what identity. When we hear reggae music, we become one. So I want to say one love to all of you, and thank you. Peace. And have a good time tonight.
Any last questions from the audience before Fully Fullwood needs to go off and get some rest? Any last questions? Please don't be shy.
Another question to Junior about guitar musicianship in reggae in those days, because in a lot of reggae books you can read about in order to have reggae more fashionable, it was about calling guitarists from abroad like Al Anderson and Donald Kinsey with a kind of blues approach in order to have the reggae sounding more rock and roll. So you came from England and you had different experience musical wise. So I'm wondering, did Chris requested particularly that, like by doing any rock and roll tips in reggae?
Well, reggae and blues is the same family. We tell the same story. It's a message. And blues guitar has a special feeling. You feel it, you know? And when they did Concrete Jungle, they invited special guitarist from America. What's his name?
Of the guitarist?
Yeah, from America. Wayne Perkins.
Wayne Perkins, yeah.
Thank you. Wayne Perkins, who's a cousin of Carl Perkins. And Bob explained to him, play like this, da-da, da-da-da-da. And he said, okay. And he played exactly what Bob sang for him. And it fitted perfect. And then, of course, many years later, we have Donald Kingsley, who comes from a big blues family, the Kingsley Report. Excellent blues guitar. And Al Anderson came, Natty Dread, Lively Up Yourself, No Woman, No Cry. Beautiful combination. And many other guitar players. What's the other guitar player who played with Peter? You remember him? Anyway, there were some other guitar players who came.
Guy from US, maybe Daryl Thompson or
that's him.
The man Daryl Thompson.
Daryl, yeah. And then, of course, in Jamaica, you have Mikey Chung, Jeffrey Chung, China Smith, and many other guitar players. And I was very lucky to be invited also. But I think the combination of blues, rock, and jazz, for example, in Waiting in Vain, I tried to play like George Benson or Wes Montgomery, and it's still a perfect fit, you know. And the Heathen, I tried to play like Jimi Hendrix in the Heathen, more aggressive, you know. But the combination of the words from Bob, the music of Carly and Family Man, and Fully, give it that foundation. So the guitar players have a very easy time to play. It's so easy for us with this foundation, you know. And reggae has strong roots. Drum and bass is very, very strong, very powerful. And for lead guitar, that's perfect. So I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao. Arrivederci. See you later. We gotta go.
Okay. Please, another big round of applause for Fully Fullwood and Junior Marvin.
And catch them later on the main stage tonight. I'd like to...
Big round of applause for John. Come on.
Stick around because we're just starting our second portion of today's session with author John Masouri, who's written this very heavyweight book, Wailin' Blues, the story of Bob Marley's Wailers.
Thank you very much for coming here. This is what the book looks like. It's quite big. In 1998, I had a phone call from Family Man from the Wailers, who he asked me if I would write his story. And I thought, no, the last thing the world needs is another book on Bob Marley. This is not for me. I'd been writing about reggae music for a long time, and I was more interested in Beanie Man and Bounty Killer and all of these people that I was working with. So I ended up meeting with Family Man, and then I realized that there's a lot more to the Bob Marley story than what people really appreciate. And that's that the reason we are all probably here today is because of Bob Marley and because of his music, which is played by people like Junior. And yet, when you really look at the situation and you look at Bob Marley being given the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Grammys, or being honored in the Hall of Fame, there is no mention of the people who made the music. There is only mention of Bob Marley, and you see his wife go up and collect the award. Now, the other Wailers who played on that music, this hurts them greatly, because if you can imagine that you devote your life and your talent and your soul to creating music to go around the world and touch people, and then when you're older and you should be receiving your rewards, no one remembers who you are. So this is not a book about Bob Marley. This is a book about Aston Family Man Barrett, about Carlton Barrett, about Junior Marvin, about Al Anderson, about Tyrone Downey, Earl Wyalindo, and Alvin Seco Patterson. I think their story is very important, and it's a story that has not been told so far. So that was 10 years ago. It's taken us 10 years to do this. But, you know, these people, they have good heart today, but none of them own their own homes. None of them are wealthy. None of them receive money from the Bob Marley legacy. Rita Marley, by her own admission, is worth 600 million US. At the same time, someone like Seiko, who was percussionist with the Wailers, who was like father figure to Bob Marley, because remember, Bob Marley had no father that he knew. Seiko was the man who took him to Studio One to make his first record. He took him to Leslie Kong to make his first record, and then to Studio One. Seiko's wife is the lady who took the sliver out of his eye when he had the accident, when he was welding. These two elderly Jamaicans live in a one-room place in Kingston, and they have no money for medical care. They're both old and frail. So it's people like this who I've got to know and to love and to cherish as people who are the unknown soldiers to the Bob Marley story. And this book was supposed to encourage people to ask questions, so that when you see Marley honored, and no one wants to take anything away from Bob Marley, but when you see his memory honored, then I would like you to spare a thought for the people who made this music possible. What you find, or what I found over these 10 years, is that Bob Marley was a very skillful writer, a very charismatic singer, but he did not do everything. This was not like Bob Dylan, who sits with a guitar, who writes the words, the melody, who writes the chords, and then brings in other musicians and say, I want you to play this. That didn't happen with Bob Marley. That reggae music is more of a joint effort. So very often, when he was fronting the band, dealing with business, talking to press and so forth, the band members were in the studio making rhythm tracks, trying out ideas, trying out different instruments, and creating this music. Then he would come and put his magic on there. This is something that we don't hear. You know, we're given the impression that, you know, Bob Marley did everything. This, if we think about it, could never be true. Also, when he was alive, he treated all of these people fairly. He paid his musicians extremely well, and he gave the Barrett brothers, the drum and bass of the Wailers, the most important musician in the Wailers, a share, not wages, but a share of the money they generated. Because if you notice on all of these hit records, it does not say Bob Marley. It says Bob Marley and the Wailers. Now, when the Grammys host their awards, they give the Lifetime Achievement to Bob Marley. There's no mention of the Wailers. There is no mention of the Wailers. My argument is that if Mick Jagger died and they gave the Rolling Stones an award, they would give it to Keith Richards or Charlie Watts or a surviving Rolling Stones. They would not give it to Mick Jagger's wife. No one asked these questions. It's because it's almost like there is a spell that has been created around this myth that has made certain individuals very, very rich indeed. The musicians certainly aren't rich, but the people behind this story are. I think they've done a very good job of enshrining his memory and making sure that we honor his memory and we love the music, but they did not do the full job. When you go to the Bob Marley Museum in Kingston, everywhere you look, there are photographs, just like this. There's photographs on every wall, and when you look more closely, you find out that there are no photographs of his musicians. There are none. There is nothing to show that these people existed. So this is why I wrote the book, you know, and this is why, you know, the band members wanted their story to be told, because if they can't have the money, then at least they can let you know what they did, you know? It's done in 3 parts. The first part tells the early days of the Barrett brothers. And, you know, Family Man, he was born in 1946 and in Beeston Street in downtown Kingston, and the Scatterlights used to rehearse in his yard, and this man was lived and breathed music from he was born. He was a bit wayward at school, and he joined the youth cadets, the youth corps. He went out into the country, and he played piano in this little band called the Drive-In Cracker Boys. I can't imagine what they sounded like. But they played Fats Domino, country tunes, and then it was Jamaican independence. He came back to Kingston. His father was a blacksmith. He worked as a welder, and he started making his own instruments. He made it out of a bass, out of a piece of wood and a curtain rod, and his brother took some paint cans and he turned them upside down and made a drum kit. And that was the beginning of the Hippie Boys, with Max Romeo as their singer. And Family Man he was the first to record, and the Uniques, Watch This Sound was his first record, and Max Romeo's Wet Dream was his second record. They were both big hits. And then he said, my brother is coming, and his brother came and played on their third record, which was Bangarang. You know, Stranger Cole's Bangarang. So straight away, these untrained musicians had 3 hits in Jamaica. They ended up playing for everybody, for Bunny Lee, for Lee Perry, for Sonia Pottinger, for Lloyd Chalmers, you know, and for Harry J. And by 1969, just 2 years after they'd started, they had 2 records on the English top 10. You know, with Harry J's Liquidator and with the Upsetters' Return of Django, though some people say they didn't play on it. But they went to tour and promote this, and they were stranded, and Lee Perry left them with no money, and they went back to Jamaica, and that's when they teamed up with the Wailers for the first time. They made 2 albums with the Wailers, and that's when, you know, they did those songs, Kaya, Rock This, Rock Your Boat, and so forth. I mean, let me play you some Black Progress, you know? This is number 5. This is the first tune they played with the Wailers.
On our knees and start living on our feet. Cause brother, like it take 2 eyes to make a pair. We won't quit till we get our share. I'm talking about read what we've been done. Someone please stand up.
You can hear the influence of James Brown in that record. But interesting, they're saying, I don't want to live on my knees, I want to live on my feet. And that's what they did, because they decided that they were tired of getting ripped off by these Jamaican producers, and they were going to form their own band. You know, the Wailers, incorporating the Barrett brothers and Wire Lindo And they ended up signing to Island Records as the Wailers. That's the three singers, Bob, Peter, and Bunny, and, you know, the Barrett brothers, and Wailindo. It was the six who were the Wailers. That was in '72. They made 2 albums, Catch a Fire, Burning. But then Peter and Bunny, they left. So this left Bob Marley on his own with the Barrett brothers. There is no Wailers anymore. The contract with Island is invalid, so they have to arrange a new contract. This is where it became Bob Marley and the Wailers. The Wailers were the Barrett brothers. The other members were all hired sidemen. This is the lineup that made Natty Dread. Before then, the Wailers and Bob Marley had never had a hit outside of Jamaica, whereas the Barrett brothers had. So this is the point where they achieved international success. They came to London, they did sessions for Natty Dread, they met the guitarist Al Anderson. So, you know, the Barrett brothers were very important, but they didn't sign the contract. They left it up to Bob Marley. They trusted this man. They left it up to him. In the end, a manager came in, Don Taylor, who drew up yet another contract, which they weren't even mentioned on. Then they made Rastaman Vibration. And right the way down the line, this is where their troubles begin. Because if they'd have signed that first contract, there would have been something on paper to show that they had a part in this music. There was nothing on paper apart from what Bob Marley gave them. He gave them songwriting credits on songs like War, on songs like 3 O'Clock Roadblock. Later on, you know, I'll fast forward to 2006. Family Man is at home. He's watching the Grammy Awards. He's watching Rita Marley collect an award. No one's called him. He decides that he's going to do something about this. I want to read to you a letter that he sent to the Marley children. Excuse me. Okay. It starts off with, it is with great reluctance that I write to each of you, but the time has come for me to do so. Your father was more than a friend and partner to me. We were both soul rebels, and as one who was there from the beginning, none of us ever imagined that we would achieve the success that we did. Because we were close friends and business partners, we never felt the need to attend to the music business details we should have. We were too busy creating music. I was there when your father needed help and we put together Natty Dread. It was that record that started the international recognition and fame. That's why your father insisted that Carly and I sign with him when our Island record contract was negotiated. Also on the album Rastaman Vibration, it was Carly and I who made significant contributions. As you know, it was the best part of my life that I treasured as we all created and made musical history. But as time marches on, I become more aware of what I specifically contributed to the music of Bob Marley and the Wailers. As we grow older, I want to collect on the efforts I have made, nothing more and nothing less. Ever since the death of your father, there has been an attempt by someone to hide the truth and prevent me from collecting what I am owed. The agreements that are presented to me were always an effort by your lawyers to pay me a fraction of what your father knew I was worth. Clearly, the point was to take advantage of me and to treat me in such a fashion that your father would be embarrassed by. Can you tell me what the response was to this letter from Damian Marley, Stephen Marley, Julian Marley, Ziggy Marley, Rowan Marley? It was nothing. They never even replied, and he'd known them since they were born. He was like their uncle. He used to take them to school. I interviewed them all, and they told me they were embarrassed, but they couldn't do anything, you know, family politics. But this gives you some idea of what was going on. You know, even before Bob Marley died, we all know that he was in the clinic in Bavaria, and what we don't often hear is that he was making some recovery, and then he was given some Jamaican food that made him so ill that a section of his colon had to be surgically removed. This is what killed him. No one's saying he wouldn't have died eventually, but this is what hastened his death. No one reports this because no one wants you to know. You know, we've heard about the Deceivers tape, people leaving cassettes, you know, Bob Marley leaving a cassette under his bed, you know, so, you know, it was overheard. He overheard people scheming as to what was going to happen with the money. We know about this. You know, also, you know, not too long ago, attempts were made to rebury him in Ethiopia. And yet this is a man who died trying to get back to his homeland in Jamaica. This is some serious shit that's been going down here. You know, we have seen so many Bob Marley documentaries. Why aren't we told these things? Why haven't we been told these things? I think there's a reason for it, you know, because it's building an image, and certain people have been cut out of the picture, namely the people who made the music. After he died, I could go into all the legal things. I've seen all of the court documents. I've seen all of the court transcripts. I've sat in courtrooms. I've listened to these people give evidence. And it's a shocking picture that emerges. The people who could do something to change this situation normally come out walking away scot-free. I'll give you an example. That family man 2 years ago took the record company and the Marley estate to court, and Chris Blackwell was called up. We think of him as a cool guy. We're led to believe that this is a cool guy. And yet, the man denied that, he said that 56 Hope Road, he gave to the Marley estate as a gift after Bob Marley's death. This is very generous of him. And yet, you know, the Wailers lawyers came up with deeds which proved that they bought 56 Hope Road from him in 1974. The man felt no shame, you know. There's other things like the man denies ever knowing where King's house is in Kingston, and he used to work there, and it goes on and on and on. And in the meantime, Earl Wialindo, who played keyboards on so many crucial records with Bob Marley, is in a council flat in Streatham in London. He has mental problems, he has no money, and he has no livelihood. He receives no money from the Wailers. You know, you have other members who have drug problems and, you know, or who have to keep touring, playing Bob Marley music all the time. They're musicians, they want to grow, but that's the way that they make a living. It's sad, it's sad. And you would think that with all the money that has been generated by all of you people and me buying Bob Marley CDs, 250 million CDs, why aren't these people being provided for? These are the questions that the book asks. No one's pointing fingers at anybody, but just raising questions. Anyone got any questions? Yes.
Did you send the book to the Marley family, and what was their reaction if you did?
Well, like I say, I mean, I talk to the sons because I interview them for music magazines and so on, and they are ashamed because this is daddy's musicians, and they know the situation, but they opt out. Their silence is deafening. Rita, in the meantime, you know, is too busy opening restaurants, you know, with Bob Marley hamburgers and this kind of thing in Florida, and too busy owning villages in Ghana or doing whatever to really take any notice.
I am still interested to know, what do you think their reaction will be once the book is on the market? Because, okay, you could talk to them before and be ignored, but I think once the book come out, there should be another reaction.
If you have 600 million US in the bank, believe you me, you are not worried about something like that. You're not worried, you know? The test is, I mean, no one's suing the publishers for this, so, you know, that must mean something. If these things were untrue, then they would be on us like a ton of bricks, right? No one's taking anything away from Bob Marley or how great he was. You know, we all love Bob Marley and we love his music, but I don't think he would want to have this situation. I can't imagine. I mean, I only met him once, so I don't know. But from what people have told me, many people have told me, he would never tolerate this. But it's also a celebration of some great music, some great early music. But yes, it does. It asks a lot of questions. Anyone else?
I was going to ask Junior this, but I didn't really want to. Oh, sorry. I was going to ask it to Junior, but I'm a bit shy, first of all, and didn't want to ask what may appear to be negative questions. But I wanted to ask him about the bad along with the good. He was telling good stories about the first time he met Bob Marley and these sorts of things. And I know there must have been some down times, and I kind of wanted, it sounds like you know quite a bit about this. So is that mentioned in the book? Is Junior? Yeah. Or after, really? Because I know he continued on with the Wailers doing, after it was over, and he also did a lot of his own music. He wrote a lot of songs and stuff, too, that were really nice. And then he seemed to have gotten sort of cut out of it or something. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit.
The band members all love Bob Marley. They love working for him. They love playing with him. It's like Family Man says in his letters, you know, it's the happiest time of his life that he treasures. They treasured that time. It was their best times as musicians, and that's why it's difficult for them now, you know, 30 years later, when all of that outpouring of creativity is earning other people so much money and so much recognition, and none of it is coming their way. I mean, yes, you know, when we see Junior here, we can think, this is Junior Marvin, you know, he played these great guitars, you know, on Exodus and Survival and these records, but that's all he gets. He gets praise, but no raise. This is his contribution. I mean, some people have said, well, you know, in the early 90s, they signed away their rights in what's called the 94 settlement. And I think everybody in this room has made poor judgments in their lives, bad decisions. You know, whether drugs, drink, you know, family problems, you know, we take our eye off the ball and whoops, you know, we've done something and we know that shit, shouldn't have done that. Well, these guys are human and that's exactly what they did. And yet, I think, you know, if I have a piece of paper and it says that I own everything you have, there's something missing that, you know, you can't have law alone, you have to have compassion. Because no one knew that this music would be so huge to bring all of these people here, you know, to this festival. No one knew that in Jamaica. They couldn't dream of that, you know. They wanted to hear themselves on the radio and, you know, have a hit and, you know, buy their girl a pair of shoes and, you know, it's like keep on doing what they were doing. So, yeah, it's, they did make mistakes. When they signed this settlement, there's conflicting reports because there's no one version of events, you know, when it comes to the Wailers. And, you know, some of them say that they were strong-armed into signing this settlement, that certain people came up to them and whispered in their ear, if you don't sign this, you're in big trouble. You know, other people accept that they did sign it. The thing is, you have to ask yourself the question, did they know what they were signing? You know, can you seriously expect a Jamaican musician, you know, and at that time, you know, they were all in their 40s and, you know, the family man in particular is not a great reader. He can't understand a lot of things. Carlton Barrett was even dead at that time. So why his children don't get his share, I have no idea. He wasn't even alive to sign it. But anyway, they signed it. You know, it said basically, you are screwed and, you know, here's £50,000 and you will never have anything to do with the Wailers again. That's basically what the settlement came down to. Carlton Barrett is interesting, you know, because this was one of the most shocking things to me that I learned when I was doing the book with the Wailers, was that after Rita had been accused of forging Bob Marley's signature on checks, and she'd been stripped of the as administrator of the estate. The Wailers, you know, assets were passed over to a bank, and family man who lived in the back of the house was told to move. He'd helped create and he'd helped to buy 56 Hope Road. He had this man from the bank who he'd never seen before saying, "You're evicted." He didn't know what was going on. It took him 3 trips to move his belongings from the little house behind Hope Road to his new address. Each time he went back, things were missing. Rare tapes, you know, rare studio recordings, rehearsal tapes. These were later found, I don't know how, in Rita Marley's basement, soaked in water in a terrible condition. And this is how they made the songs Iron Lion in a Zion and Slogans from these same tapes, which mysteriously appeared years later in her basement. At the same time, you know, family man, he had car parts stolen, which mysteriously, you know, materialized in Sharon Marley's garage, and, you know, but there's security on the gate, so every time he loads a van and pulls out, you know, it's a security guard and a locked gate behind him. The next time he goes in, whoa, where's my stuff? You know, I'm not accusing anyone, I'm just posing questions. Around the same time, because, you know, the Wailers, they weren't recording, they'd stopped doing sessions, so the Barrett brothers decided to go back out onto the road as the Wailers and back a singer called Jimmy Riley, whose son gave a magnificent show here the other night. They arranged it with a booking agent in America, promoting the shows as the Jimmy Riley Experience, featuring the Wailers, the Barrett brothers. Then he hears from Rita Marley saying, you cannot go ahead with this, that these people are not Wailers and they cannot use the name. The promoter, you know, said to Family Man what was happening, and he said, well, I can't impersonate myself. You know, I am a Wailer, so the tour has to go ahead, which it did. They'd done about 3 shows when they heard from Jamaica that their father had been kidnapped. This is an elderly man, an elderly Jamaican living in Kingston, the father of the Barrett brothers. No trouble to anybody. He went missing for like 5 days. The Barretts are very worried. They're phoning home every day. You know, has anyone found, you know, Daddy? Finally, he turns up. His head had been cut off, his arms and his legs had been cut off. He'd been decapitated and dismembered. That's how they found the body. They had to quit the tour and go home. Again, nobody is accusing anybody of anything, but that was a coincidence. We ask ourselves, why haven't we all heard of this? If we're Bob Marley fans, why haven't we heard of this? So these are the kind of things that I write about, you know, as well as a celebration of all the music and so forth. And yeah, it's another side. And, you know, there's glad tales and there's sad tales, but that was certainly a sad tale. There's also another one when Family Man was preparing for the court case in 2006, which he lost. We were in Jamaica and we were gathering affidavits, statements from people who were generally helpful. And we knew that the Marleys didn't like this, but, you know, he was determined to go through with it. A girl who worked at Tough Gong was very helpful in giving him a fax. In this fax were details of money that was owed to the Barrett brothers by Rita's lawyer, saying, they've accrued this many hundreds of thousands of dollars, I suggest you don't give it to them. It was a very incriminating piece of evidence. The girl passed it over to Family Man's lawyers. Within 3 days, the girl had been kidnapped and her boyfriend. They were taken up into the hills above Kingston. The girl's boyfriend was murdered in front of her and she was released. I'm not accusing anybody of this. I'm simply asking the question, was this a coincidence? I just present the facts. We left Jamaica and came to London, where the court case took place. A week later, Family Man's oldest son, Kamani, because he called his son Kamani before Bob named one of his sons Kamani, Kamani was taken out of his apartment in Kingston, shot 8 times in the head, and his body thrown in a gully. He wasn't connected with drugs. He wasn't connected with gangs. He was a bright kid. He had a bright future. Again, I am not accusing anybody. I'm just presenting the facts. So these are the kind of things that have been happening all the way along this story ever since Bob Marley died. It makes grim listening, I know, but this is, I think, necessary for all of us fans of Bob Marley to really appreciate the greatness of this man, because I am sure that these things would not have happened had he been alive. At the court case, the judge decided that Bob Marley had written all of his songs on his own and took away the songwriting credits that Bob, in his lifetime, had given these musicians. So the little money that they were getting off the publishing rights stopped immediately, and the money reverted to the Marley legacy. So that court case cost over £1 million, and it ended up costing Family Man his home, his future, being able to provide for his family, his dignity, his work, the rights to his work. And in the meantime, he has to sit there at home in his rented place, watching his television, as someone who didn't even sing on most of the records goes up and collects the awards. That's it. I try to do my best for these people. They're wonderful human beings, and I think their story deserves to be told. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions for John Masouri from the audience about this book?
About the court case, I remember reading on papers that at a certain point a family man statement came out causing such a sensation, and probably it was got out of the context, but the statements basically was in the last years Bob was just making love with women and playing football and nothing else. And probably Family Man was very frustrated, and probably, as I told you, these statements was got out of context by the press. Can you comment this, because you're very into the story?
Okay. Can you tell me the source of the story?
At this particular moment, no, to be honest.
The source of the story was Universal Music, who actually control all of the Bob Marley songs and, you know, who represent the Marley estate. They're like that, all right? What Family Man said to the judge was asking him about how certain songs were made. Family Man said, do you imagine that Bob Marley was there in the studio night and day? He wasn't. He was taking care of business. You know, he had his girlfriends and everything, but he would come in and do the important part. He'd put the magic. He'd put the magic on there. They took this and made it seem like this man, who was Bob Marley's closest musical associate, was disrespecting him. At the same time, they put out a rumor saying that Family Man was offered $5 million to drop the case. I happened to be with him when he got the call, and he was offered $50,000 to drop the case. He'd already spent 10 times that. You know, so we can't always believe, you know, what we read.
We have a next question for John Masouri about this book, Wailin' Blues, the story of Bob Marley's Wailers. Do you have any questions from the audience?
let me treat you to some unreleased Bob Marley in the meantime. This is number 11. This is Bob Marley, the ladies' man. He's with the two girls who sing on No Woman, No Cry. That wasn't Rita, that wasn't Marcia, that wasn't Judy. They didn't sing on most of Rastaman Vibration. This was two girls from London, and this is Bob Marley in the room, kind of, well, you will hear, you'll hear.
Yes, could you keep a conversation going without making somebody feel bad? Huh? Could you say a few words of gentleness so my life won't be sad? Come on, baby. The street is busy, everybody getting home from work.
Except for you.
Except for me, I don't work. Nobody would hire me. First thing, they don't like the way I look. And I won't change it.
Because of the inspiration.
Oh, you're talking about inspiration now. Yeah. That's what I like. Now everybody could talk. Somebody keep their minds closed. Here come. This is life, baby. You're living in the 2000th century. Is everybody take everything for a joke? I just said, could you keep a conversation without making somebody feel funny, didn't I?
Who's feeling funny?
All right, all right.
There's a person you should talk to.
Well, I'm talking to you, lady. How you feeling tonight?
I'm
Who?
like hell.
Irene. Is she feeling irate? I'm feeling irate. Ain't nothing to feel irate about. What's happening? This world is full of doubts, baby. Not even the disco gonna last.
Well, needless to say, that was never released. But that was like Bob Marley just relaxing with these girls and feeling nice. And you know, Zimbabwe has been in the news lately, and you know, Bob Marley played at the independence ceremony for Zimbabwe in January 1980, and when he was over there, he was taken to see some of the rebels in the bush. These were the freedom fighters, and their music, you know, Bob Marley's music it meant so much to these people in their struggle. So he went out to see them, but there were no windows in the bus. And on the journey, some of the band members got sick. So he wrote this song called Jungle Fever. And, but it was never finished during his lifetime. Yeah, that was never released either, but some of you may recognize some of that sound in there, that melody, because he later used it for Could You Be Loved, you know? So, yeah, I don't know whether Junior remembers that one, but yeah. I'll leave you with another one, a dub track. This is an early, it's not a dub, it's an early version of Bend Down Low, and it's with a flute, and it's different, and, but anyone has any more questions, then, you know, please ask away, and yeah.
I do have a question, John. So how did Omnibus Press react when you presented the manuscript? Maybe they expected something else?
Yes, this is another untold story that it was originally supposed to be a book about just what I've been talking about. And because there are too many music books already on Bob Marley, so I didn't feel the need to go back over that. But they got cold feet. And, you know, they cut out a lot from the book, you know, well over 150 pages, because they were worried about legal action and so on. And so, therefore, I had to go back over some of the same ground that's been told before to make it more of a music book. But I feel like, you know, a battle is not won, you know, with one skirmish. And they say the race is not for the swift, but for who can endure. And we just want to let this one go out and do its work, and then we're going to regroup and we're going to come again. So, and tell it in a different way, and maybe find a publisher which is a little more brave, you know, in future.
So does that mean that you're intending to actually do a separate book, or to rework this book for a different publisher, or what do you mean?
Well, I have 150 pages of material that's not in there, so I mean, that's a different book. So we'll see. But I don't want that to get in the way of that one, you know. I mean, maybe, you know, there should be documentaries, and what I'm hoping is that now some of these things are out there. It will inspire filmmakers to make documentaries asking these questions. It will encourage people writing for magazines to ask these questions. It will inspire people putting together award shows that when it's Bob Marley's, you know, 100th birthday, and they think, hang on a minute, you know, this, we remember seeing this book. And so I'm hoping that it will generate some kind of, you know, influence like that.
Next question for John Masouri. Any other questions for John Masouri from the audience? Yeah, please come forward and take the microphone.
So, if it's the truth, I can sue you for it.
Why can't they sue me for it?
The pages you're missing from the book. If it's the truth, I can sue you for it.
Well, the thing is that they cut the pages from the book because they're frightened of being sued. It doesn't, you know, I was very careful, and I worked from all of the court transcripts, you know. All of it is factual. I didn't make anything up. So, but it's just that publishers, you know, they get a little scared, and they think, woo, you know, we don't really want this kind of attention. So they downplayed it like that. I think also something that they published the Bob Marley sheet music, and they didn't want to lose that either, you know. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Any last questions for John Masouri?
And John, Rita Marley, of course, also appeared in court. So what was her reaction? You know, because she was singing with those musicians and everything. So how did she behave in court when this whole thing was?
She was there, you know, wearing all her Obia gear, the white turbans, and, you know, all of this. And the judge, whenever the judge spoke to her, she talked with a little tear in her eye, and it was an Oscar-winning performance from Rita. Oscar-winning, but to me, you know, the best, the defining moment of the court case was that the High Court judge said to Family Man, Mr. Barrett, how would you define Chris Blackwell's, you know, role with the Wailers? And Chris Blackwell was sitting right there, and Family Man said, well, Your Honor, he was the plantation owner, and we were the musical slaves.
Any other questions? Any last questions? Yeah, go ahead.
And John, now you said Family Man lost the case, which is a shame. So is there anything which can still be done in the whole thing, or you will just have to live with it and with all the money which has to be paid? So is there any hope in the end?
The judge has forbidden Family Man from ever bringing the case to court ever again. And also the case involving his brother. Yet his brother died in 1987, and I don't see how this is possible, that the descendants of Carlton Barrett could be barred from ever bringing this to court, because their father never signed anything, and he never signed anything away. It's also interesting, I just mentioned about Carlton Barrett. On that same tour that they did with Jimmy Riley, where the father was killed, his weight was going up and down, you know, he was getting bloated, he was going thin, and he was saying to people that he was being poisoned. Shortly after that, within a year after that, he was shot dead at the front gate of his house. You know, it was Easter. His wife had sent him out for jerk chicken. He'd driven out, and he'd come back with this chicken, which he didn't eat. As he was at the gate, instead of the gate being left open, it had been closed. So he had to stop the car, get out of the car, and someone came right up next to him and shot him through the head. Inside the house, his daughter, you know, and his stepdaughter cried, they've shot Daddy, they've shot Daddy. But, you know, his wife shut the girl up. And it was later found that his wife and her lover had hired this man to murder him. They got off scot-free on a technicality. The question is, because that can happen, the question is, their legal fees were paid by Rita Marley. Can you imagine? At the funeral, this is the man who was called the best reggae drummer in the world, certainly the most successful, because this is before Sly Dunbar's big success. He died. No one from Island Records went anywhere near it. No one sent any condolences. Bob Marley's mother gave Family Man a soiled, dirty 100 Jamaican dollar note and said, this is for your brother. 100 Jamaican dollars at that time was worth £2. Family Man had to sell his farm and to pay for the burial. There's been no tributes from Ireland and no mention of this, and yet, yes, and you know, his his killers, you know, their legal fees, whoa, they were paid for. So, again, I'm not accusing anyone, but I am asking more questions.
Well, John, when you say the judge's ruling was that Family Man can't bring any other court case or take any other legal action for himself or his brother, is he allowed to appeal the judge's decision?
No, he's not allowed to appeal at all. No, he's been barred from appeal. By the way, Carly had 3 children. 2 of the children live in Brownstown in Jamaica. You know, they're both illiterate, they have no work, and they have no means of support. They've never had any money from the Marley estate. The Marley children all receive £20,000 a month allowance from the estate on top of their recording deals, on top of their performance money, sponsorship deals, and everything else. Carlton Barrett's children receive nothing. None of the Wailers' children receive anything.
As we know, it's plenty of books about Bob Marley. So I was wondering if you did quote any of this, and if anyone was very useful, if any book was useful as a source in your work, as I know the Timothy Whites and...
Yes, I thank a great many people in the book who helped me with writing it, and people like Jimmy Cliff, people like you know, Alton Ellis, 90 The Observer, Bunny Lee, Max Romeo, Jimmy Riley, most of the Wailers. I mean, just so many people, Toots, you know, Toots and the Maytals. So many people wanted this story to be told and came forward with information, yes.
Sorry, I was asking about the books. If you did quote any of the previous books about Bob Marley.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Because, you know, the way I see it is building bricks and, you know, that there's stepping stones, you know, you tell the story. I mean, yes, it's, there's a huge body of literature, films, music out there. And I hope people also quote from mine and use, you know, my book too.
I know you did quote some interviews taken by an Italian website, the BobMarleyMagazine.com.
That's right, BobMarley.com, and a journalist called Marco, and out of the hundreds of interviews in the book, there were 2 very, you know, good ones from him. So I hope he's here, but I thank him for that, yes. Mm.
Yeah, I wanted to say really thank you for your boldness, John, because I think books like that are really, really so important. And really the question you put, I hope that everyone keeps those questions in mind and spreads the questions. Because as John said, some things are really shocking and they have to, you have to breathe through, take it in for a while, you know, because we do not have this information. As John said, those things are just hidden. They are not there. They are not outspoken. And I want to really like to give the people a really, really big applause to what you do over all the years in your work. Give thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe one last question. The book is out now, John, and which reactions did you get from the public so far? How did the public, like the reviews and everything, so what were the reactions?
Yes, they were positive, and you know, no one's really taken up those main questions because it's been reviewed mainly as a music book, which is fine, it's cool, and I think it will take time for the real kind of meat of this book to actually come out. And But you know, for the time being, it's good. It's yes, it's all positive and it's all good. So.
I would have liked the support, the money is raised by sports to go to the Wailers.
What country is it available in? Is that what you're asking?
The money raised for the sport to go to the Wailers.
Does the money contribute towards the Wailers? Yes, I wrote it with Family Man Barrett, and yes, for sure. I think it will be a long time before we're in the black. It took 10 years.
Any other questions? In that case, please give us a last round of applause for John Masouri, author of Wailin' Blues, the story of Bob Marley's Wailers. And that concludes today's session at the Reggae University, and indeed, it's the final session for this year's Rototom Sunsplash. We hope to be back next year with bigger and better sessions at the Reggae University. Thanks very much to everyone who's participated. You've been a wonderful audience.
Do it with my band.